about those as well. And then we'll finish with some updates and sharing about what we're going to be doing next. So with that, we'll do just some welcome and or some introductions, I guess. So if you could share your name and then share a fun winter activity that you've either done already this winter or are planning to do. And I will stop sharing my screen and I guess I'll go first. I already said who I am, but I am, I'm looking forward to going downhill skiing in Utah next week. So it's been a while since I've been out there to downhill ski, so I'm looking forward to getting back. And I am just going to pull up the participant list and go down in the order that they show up for me. So Marty, do you mind going next?
Sure. So Marty Stockton, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and co-project manager with Brian. And just good to see all of you again. It's been a while, but lovely to see you all. And my winter activity that I enjoyed so much is that I went snowshoeing on a Galentine's Day activity with my girlfriends to celebrate a 50th birthday within the group. And so that was a lovely gathering. So, and who is next?
Next is Laura.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Patino Lillard. I work with Marty at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability in the Urban Design Studio. I'm new to this group, so thank you for having me in this space, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about some of the work I've been doing. I guess for winter activities, I'm also looking forward to some downhill skiing later on in the season.
Great, thanks. Julie Garner, it looks like you're next.
Okay. Hello, I'm Julie Garner, and I haven't really, I've been out biking, but that's kind of normal. But actually my girlfriend and I are going to LA in a couple weeks to see her family. So I'm really excited for warm weather. I'm so over the rain. So that's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I was in San Diego a few weekends ago. It was very nice to be
nice.
in somewhere warm. Thanks, Julie. Lori, do you want to go next?
You're talking about me?
Yeah.
I'm actually masquerading accidentally on my partner's Zoom tonight. So I'm actually Kathy.
Okay, sorry, I just reading the list down there.
Realize they were person specific.
Yeah.
But I haven't done any huge things. Mostly I've been spending more time playing games with friends and family as COVID restrictions have lightened up, and spending a lot of time trying to train my Pomeranian dog, which with limited success. But that's mostly what I've been doing.
Sounds great. Thank you. Anna, you want to go next?
Sure. Anna Weichsel. Yeah, I'm not much of a winter activity person, and I'm also rather busy throughout the winter usually. But I just came back from a nice weekend on the coast, and that felt very cold and very wet, but it was really great. So, some fresh air through the hair.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the coast is nice in a different way in the winter. So
We're very wild at this point.
yeah. Thanks for joining. Aaron, you want to go next?
Aaron, he, him, and I'll just join the parade of just ignoring the question about winter activities, instead just talk about we're going on vacation some point soon, and have a trip out to the gorge in a couple weeks to White Salmon. Nice. To just get a couple days White Salmon, Hood River, and change of scenery, and so looking forward to that.
Great, yeah, it's a great place. Ben, do you want to go next?
Ben, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Can anyone else hear Ben?
No.
Does this work now?
Yep, there you go.
Great. Okay. At Ben Waterhouse, I had the opportunity to do something I've done a couple of years, which was to bike to my office in sub 20-degree weather last week with the balaclava and the frozen eyeballs. So that was great.
I'm glad you enjoyed that. I was glad that we were working from home during those times, but well, that's good. That's a good winter activity. Cassie, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Cassie Ballou with BPS. I work within the Urban Design Studio with Laura and Marty on the project. I am new to the group as well, so looking forward to hearing the conversation tonight. I guess winter activity, we're planning some snowshoeing trips, but the only one we've done so far is last week when we had that dusting of snow. We had a little bit of buildup in our backyard and got to do some snowballs, and that's about it. So, yeah.
Great. Awesome, thanks. Bill, do you want to go next? Bill Cunningham?
Sure. Bill Cunningham with Planning and Sustainability, he, him. For those who don't know me, I've been helping out with some of the complete communities type topics. For me, it's been all about unwinter activities, I think, this year. Like the guilty pleasure of going on hikes on trails without mud, like last week with the sunshine. Yeah, cold but not muddy. So it's been a rather unwintry thing, or escaping to the coast during one of our unseasonably warm weekends. So yeah, guilty pleasures. I know you're not supposed to be enjoying the fact that we're not getting snowpack and enough rain, but that's what I've been doing.
That's fine. Yeah, thanks. Hopefully today helped a little bit with the rain. Yeah. Eleanor, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Eleanor, she, her. One of the things I've recently rediscovered is indoor activity. I'm going to open and family swim with my 4-year-old at the community center, feeling like we're in a tropical location and then going back out in 20-degree weather. It's been really fun.
Yeah, that's a great winter activity. And you don't have to spend money on flights then, so. Great, well, thanks for joining. Let's use that next. Hector, you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Hector Rodriguez. My pronouns are he, him. I'm with ODOT. I'm a contract manager with the project. My winter activities, I will say, like the San Sebastian Festival back in Puerto Rico. This is in the beach. But snowshoeing in Oregon, definitely. And watching RuPaul with my friends. That's what we made my winter. So
nice. Thanks, Hector. Jed, you next.
Hi, my name's Jed. My pronouns are he, him. For some reason, I made a poncho for riding my bike this summer, and now I'm testing it out in the rain, and that gets me to go outside, and it works pretty well. So it doesn't mean I'm not tired of the rain, but there are a couple of days where it feels okay to be productive and dry outside.
Nice. It's cool. It's a good invention to have for Oregon. Yeah. Great. Thanks for joining. Who's next? Kevin Bond, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Bond. He, him pronouns. I'm a city planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I'm a member of the project team with Marty and Brian and Cassie and Laura. So we've actually done this icebreaker a few times amongst ourselves. So I've done the snowshoeing and I've done the cross country, but I'll share a new one. I just got back from my bachelor party. It was in Florida for a week. And it was great. And even though I got sick with something, I've been able to pass 2 COVID tests that came back negative. So I somehow managed not to get sick with COVID while I was there, and I had a fantastic time. So that was a pretty good winter activity, and I got to do some sailing. So thanks.
Great, thanks. I had lost my list, but Mauricio, I saw that you joined. So do you want to go next?
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
Oh, introductions.
Yeah, introduction, just your name and a winter activity that you've done.
Winter activity, go to the Cascades, enjoy the cold and snow. I'm a supervising planner with the Portland Bureau of Transportation. And I work with Brian on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Kennedy, do you want to go next?
Hello, I'm Mike Kennedy. Winter is my favorite time of year, so I enjoy, the hiking, going to the coast, camping, perfecting wet weather camping. So I'm not ready for winter to end.
Great, well, thanks. True Oregonian. Nancy, do you want to go next?
Hi, Nancy Chapin, she, her. Is that who you said?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. 82nd Avenue. Well, usually we go to the beach a couple times in the winter, but this year just hasn't happened. So I guess my winter activity is getting ready for the Hawthorne Street Fair in August. So.
Great, well, thanks. That's something good to look forward to. Ryan, can you go next?
Yeah, Ryan, he, him, and I oftentimes get my winters and summers mixed up. So I like to rappel waterfalls all day, every day.
Nice. That's good. Oh, thanks for sharing. And next we have Tim.
I'm Tim Williams, he, him pronouns, and our big winter activity was a week up at my sister-in-law's cabin at Lake Wenatchee, where there was like 3 feet of snow when we were there, and just getting our kids used to sledding and stuff like that, until my father-in-law fractured his hip on the snow. That was kind of a bummer.
Yeah, that's good.
Good time nonetheless.
Great, well, yeah. Thanks for sharing. And I like your lights too. It's a cool, you got nice effects going. Thanks for sharing. And then we have Valeria McWilliams.
Yes, hi everyone, Valeria McWilliams, she, her. Well, I tried snowshoeing for the first time since I've been in Oregon. I went to Trillium Lake. And I don't know if this was a newbie thing, but it also happened to be like the first nice day of winter, like a month and a half ago. And I spent 8 hours in the car making my way back to Portland from there. So I don't know. It's really good to hear all of these other options, or just not go to Mount Hood for snowshoeing. So yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have to time your leaving the mountain area to not have that happen. Yeah.
And actually, if you don't mind driving a little further, you can go the other direction through Hood River and then back around, and that cuts out a little time, and you can eat while you're in Hood River. So that's usually what we do.
My friend did that and they beat us by like 45 minutes. So it was like 7 hours one way or the 8 hours. So it was so bad.
Welcome to the snow commute. You got to time it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. Hopefully it was fun nonetheless. And then we have Valeria Tapia.
Hi, I'm Valeria. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also with the BPS team on this project. And I guess I'm in grad school, so my winter activities are kind of limited to reading and writing most weekends. So lots of reading for me during this winter time. But hopefully I will get out and go snowboarding this next month.
Great. Wow. Reading is fun in its own way, I guess, right? Good rainy day activity. Great, well, thanks. And then we also have, I think, at least one guest, Justin Krug. Do you want to introduce yourself and sort of explain your relation to the Lower Southeast project area?
All right. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm multitasking by eating here. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to listen in on the meeting. I'm a resident of Southeast Woodstock area, so the area that I'm kind of focused on is right around me, Southeast Steel, and along with a couple other neighbors, we're interested in seeing if that might be addressed. My favorite winter activity would probably be snowshoeing, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the points of discussion are. Thank you for allowing me to listen in.
Great, thanks. Thanks for joining. And I guess next up on the agenda, I don't see any other members of the public, but it's public comment. So just, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say in addition to your introduction. It's up to you.
Oh, I'm sorry, right now?
Yeah, so this is the time we have public comment, but we'll also be able to, we'll be sharing materials during the meeting as well. So you feel free to ask questions in the chat if you have them as they come up.
Okay. Yeah, I did try and sign into the Zoom call, and I was in the waiting room for quite a while. So then I did the phone route. So if I'm going to use the chat, I can go ahead and log in on Zoom again on the computer and then put in questions. Okay. Is that the preferred method to use the chat window?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll let you in.
Okay.
Sorry if there was a delay on getting into the room. So.
Oh, no problem. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Before we move on, did we get everybody? I just wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance. Pam, please.
Hi, everyone. Last but maybe not least. So spring, I have a couple of flats of primroses. I'm just waiting for the deluge to end. And in the meantime, I'm surviving winter with indoor swimming and saunas. So staying warm is a high priority. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And sorry, Pam, for missing you. Trying to read down the list, but yeah, I accidentally skipped you. Well, thanks everyone. And Marty, I will allow you, if you can share your screen, we'll jump into the material. Let me know if you'd rather I do it.
Marty, are you having a hard time seeing the buttons at the bottom?
No, I am. Unfortunately, it's let's see if this works. Okay.
If that works, and then just the button on the.
I'm actually going to do a stop share. It's not bringing up the PowerPoint presentation. It's going straight to my my website, my web browser, which is not ideal.
It's okay. I can do it. And
yeah,
then,
thank you.
And as yeah, if we need to switch, we can do that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Does everyone see the plan overview and timeline slide?
Beautifully and perfect. Thanks, Brian.
Well, I just wanted to give a quick reorientation coming out of the holidays, and it's been a few months since we've met. So just to remind everyone sort of what the project area is that the Lower Southeast plan is focusing on. Primarily, the core focus area is on Brentwood, Darlington, but we are also we've expanded the project area to include parts of Eastmoreland, Woodstock, Mount Scott, Arleta, and Lentz. Really the boundaries being Cesar Chavez to the west, Holgate Street and Foster to the north, 92nd Avenue to the east, and then the city limits to the south. And we're really looking at ways that we can improve livability for the Brentwood, Darlington, and surrounding area neighborhoods, and also ensure that there's housing stability, and then looking at improving access to services, to schools, employment opportunities, and primarily focusing that on active transportation, so walking, biking, or taking transit. And in terms of where we're at, we are actually about halfway through the planning process. So we've shared the existing conditions. We talked about some issues and needs, and that's really what we did with the public last fall. And we'll share a bit about that in a minute of what we heard. And now we're really starting to look at possible alternatives, and that's what we're going to be sharing about tonight. That'll sort of probably stretch into the spring and probably somewhat into the summer as well, as we do public outreach and engagement around some of those alternatives, and then starting to do some implementation and prioritization in the late summer, fall, and then we'll start the sort of drafting of the plan and moving it through the legislative process to get adopted, hopefully in the spring of 2023. And so that's just a quick timeline overview, and we're going to now jump into the giving you a recap of the survey results that we had from the Pin at Portland website.
Great, thanks, Brian. So in the chat, I went ahead and just put in the web link to the Pin at Portland page, and so it definitely suggests that at some point this evening or tomorrow, you're more than welcome to go to the page and kind of click on the different comments that we received. You can't add any more comments because we closed the Pin at Portland tool in January, but they are kind of fun, especially if there's areas like Southeast Steel, for example, that you want to see what other people provided their feedback on, then you have the ability to look yourself as well. So just to recap, last summer we did a fairly robust community engagement. And one of the things that we did is we had a kickoff survey, which was an online survey that asked really kind of broad questions of the project area, kind of what what their hopes or what they liked about the area, and also kind of what some concerns were, but at a very broad level. And we quickly decided that it was going to be much more helpful for us in the next phase to have an ability to provide very targeted like spatial feedback. And so where people could click on a map and say, here is something that's positive, here's something that's negative, and just kind of type it out. And also to have a tool that allowed the transparency of that feedback. And so, you put in your feedback and can be viewed by others, and vice versa. And so, our Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff in our tech services team created this online tool. And specifically, this project had the good fortune of being the pilot of this particular tool. And so the thought is that the Pin at Portland tool could be used for other area planning projects, whether it's land use or transportation or what have you. So we kicked off this tool in mid-October, and then allowed for public feedback through kind of the beginning of January. And so there was kind of a nice duration of people to provide or length of time for people to provide feedback. And then another benefit too was when we started seeing the feedback come in, we had checked in with some other Bureau staff that we're coordinating with, and we got feedback that there actually are some specific questions that they had. So like the Bureau of Environmental Services, for example, said one question that they're interested in gleaning is where in the project area there tends to be pooling of water or ponding. And so that was a question that we coordinated with both the Woodstock Neighborhood Association and the Brentwood Darlington Neighborhood Association to kind of get some targeted feedback from the community on that. And people did participate in responding to that particular question. So that was really helpful, good coordination in the community. So specifically, we did receive about 649 comments. And I will say that of those comments, 595 are actual distinct comments. And what I mean by that is whenever you put a tool out like this, some people think, or they think it's, they use it as like a voting option. And so there were some comments that people would write, and then immediately there'd be a comment of I agree or I disagree, or you know, there was some comments that were repeated all along 82nd, for example, the same comment. And so that was just, you know, good feedback for us to see. And then there was a lot of staff comments like testing. So we had to call those out too. So I think some other things that we wanted to share is just with this particular tool, you had the ability to choose a community insight. And specifically those insights were environment, housing, land use, other public facilities, public safety, and transportation. And so a community member would pick an insight, and then they would write their comment at the location that they wanted to put that comment. And so you can see here just what theme or category of community insights were generated. So public safety was the largest community insight category with 39%. Transportation closely followed with 35%. Public facilities 3%, environment 7%, other 4%. Land use and zoning was 10%, and housing was 2%. And another point is that some of the comments actually, it's too bad we couldn't have like a second or a third community insight, that there was a lot of transportation comments that also included public safety, or a lot of land use and zoning comments that also included transportation. So there was some of that was happening as well. And so we were had to do some parsing of some of the comments. Okay, next slide. So within the Brentwood Darlington area, Valeria Tapia here tonight has been spending a considerable amount of time doing the synthesis and analysis of the comments. And we will be having a Pennant Portland summary memo coming out later this week. And so we'll email it out to you here shortly. But in it, we specifically wanted to call out the comments for the Brentwood Darlington area, because that is the core area of the project. And so you can see here that, you know, once again, public safety received the most comments, followed by transportation, and then land use, and then environment. So those were, again, the themes that were, you know, folks wanted to provide feedback on. And then the next slide. And then specifically in Brentwood Darlington, we just did kind of a tally of where the comments per street. And just here, these are all community insights. And so these could be transportation, public safety, housing, for example, but we just wanted to do a tally of where there was a lot of feedback coming in. And so you can see that starting at Duke received the most comments at 65, and then kind of going on down. So those, again, are where the comments were clustered in the Brentwood Darlington area. Okay, next slide. And these are just some quotes that, again, if you have the opportunity to click on some of the comments on the website, you know, here are the types of, you know, quotes that we received. And so I'm going to just read two, but, you know, just to give you a sampling. So 52nd and Duke, between Duke and Flavel streets is one of the few areas that has some shops. Sidewalks are badly needed along 52nd. So that's kind of an example. And then Nap and 57th, lower income housing development on vacant lot is target for houseless persons to camp on edge of undeveloped property to kind of humane and dangerous living conditions, incredible opportunity to create transitional housing for families, women in need, and veterans. And so again, that's kind of the spectrum of comments we received. And again, in the memo that we've been working on, there's kind of the summary or the synthesis of it, not only for the Brentwood Darlington core area, but then for the remaining of the project area. And then we do have all the comments verbatim in the appendix, and it's organized by the community insight. So you can look at all the transportation comments, all the housing comments, and kind of review those as they came in. Okay. So we're gonna transition now. Well, actually, I'm gonna pause. Any feedback or any thoughts on the Pinup Portland tool or?
Oh, actually, I was curious, like, can we see the comments, or is that going to be sent in the report you're going to send out later? It's like were the little orange ones, were those like the little buses, or like, I was trying hard to tell like what the little symbols were. Like, is there like a map of like, or a legend that shows which ones are which? And
yeah, so I think if you, and maybe it was there when you had the ability to comment, and I don't know if you can still access it with it being closed, but you would, click on the map, and then it would bring up the key, and it would, like the bus is the transportation community insight, and then you would click on that, and then you would type in your feedback. And I think I saw Valeria had a question about demographics. No, we did not ask demographic questions in the Pinup Portland tool. Pros and cons with that for sure. What we did do is we had folks opt in on whether or not they wanted to be added to the project email list. So folks could provide that feedback. But yeah, there weren't demographic questions that were on this tool. And that's, if there's some thoughts on that, we can definitely get that back to the tech services team on that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that came up. It's something we can explore, like a survey after that asks for demographic information. That's a good strategy. And I was just going to share that, yeah, so the link that Marty just provided in the chat, you can see the categories if you click this button over here. That just shows the different categories. And so you can't comment, but you can still, you should be able to bring up, my computer's going slow, but bring up any of these comments, and it'll explain what the comment was. So you can at least still dig into the information as much as you need.
I have a question. Did you also collect information about how people heard about the tool? That might be interesting for the next time to know who actually gets access to it, so which channels the information is traveling. I mean, I know we had a lot of outreach through our neighborhood association website that triggered a lot of people to be aware of it. But that's a particular group of people. So I always wonder how you can equalize the access to it, to have like a really, widespread input on it.
Yeah, that's a great thought, and something, so we didn't ask people sort of how they heard about this for this round, but we were discussing possibly doing a sort of transit focused workshop in March, and I'm wondering maybe we also pivot and have a conversation or add on a conversation about how with the next round of public outreach we can ask questions like that would capture that, and you all could maybe help us brainstorm how best to get the word out about the public open house as well. Because I don't think we have time tonight, but that's something that's really critical to think about.
And then Aaron asked a question about, do the pins come in languages other than English? So that's definitely a question that the project team had been asking the tech services team that were developing this tool. And the response that we got is that, and I did not test this, so that's another thing. But the response that we got is that if it's done through the Google browser, there's the ability to do a Google Translate on the tool. And so that would be one way to access, have more language accessibility on the tool. But I guess I was never really confident with that information. And so it's still something that I just feel like on all of our web-based tools, it's just a constant need to be watchdogging, but also like a reminder that the staff need to be trained too on how to access those accessibility modes for our internet-based tools. And then to your follow-up question, no. Anything else?
You can keep asking questions in the chat too, but
please.
yeah. I don't know, Marty or Laura, do you want to share your screen for the next phase, walking through the scenarios?
Well, I'm going to see if I can. I'm going to see if I can do it again this time. Yep. I'm just having trouble getting to the website. There we go. Okay, so thank you for bearing with me on how I figure out how to access the PowerPoint. So we're gonna transition now to walking through really the very, very first public draft of the community development scenarios. And specifically, these are the scenarios that have to do with land use, but with kind of our spatial policy for the city. And so just to step back again, just a reminder of why we are initiating this project. We are, looking at this area, which, is, includes, Eastmoreland, Woodstock, Mount Scudder, Leda, Brentwood, Darlington, and Lens. Because, within this area, there is not a designated center or corridor specifically in Brentwood, Darlington. As you can see on this map, and this is a map that we created for our grant proposal for the Transit and Growth Management grant program with the state of Oregon, just recognizing that right now folks are traveling to Woodstock, or they're traveling to Foster or to Lentz, or really to Clackamas County to meet kind of their daily and weekly needs. And so that was just, again, a question that we're wanting to explore further with this project. And then the map on the right-hand side is also the map that we used for the grant application. And it was, it's a Bureau of Transportation generated map, and it just shows kind of our completed improved streets and streets with sidewalks in the project area. And you can see that once you get south of Southeast Duke Street, just the network as far as complete improved streets becomes much more sparse, much more deficient in kind of a transit network. And so again, those were the two maps that we shared with our grant proposal and why we're having this project. So both on the land use side, but then also on the transportation side. Again, one of the things that led up to the grant application was participating in the Brentwood Darlington Neighborhood Assessment Action Plan in 2017. This is a project that was really generated or asked for by the community. And so I was able to match up that request, that community request, with the Portland State University's Masters of Urban and Regional Planning program. So that program, the MERP program, every year does a planning workshop, and the planning workshop class picks a number of projects kind of in the Oregon, Southwest Washington area, and a group of students actually picked this project. And at the end of their project, they came up with their plan. And specifically, these are some of the goals and some of the actions that were recommendations in the plan. And specifically for housing and equity and economic development, which very much tie to land use. There were, the request that came out from that community process was to consider higher density residential zoning adjacent to 52nd and 72nd Avenues to expand housing types next to services and amenities. So that was a housing recommendation. And then an economic development recommendation on the right-hand side were to look at extending commercial zoning on 52nd to create a more continuous commercial corridor, to obtain a neighborhood corridor designation on 52nd as an extension of the Woodstock corridor to expand opportunity for funds or funding, activate the four corners of 72nd and Flavel, and then look for commercial opportunities to extend commercial activity on 72nd south of Flavel. So those were, again, the recommendations that came up through that graduate school level process. And then in the middle, not to skip that one, from a transportation recommendation, I just highlighted address safety concerns at 52nd in the corner of 52nd and Flavel. So just some recommendations there. So this is a slide that we shared at our November meeting. And so this should be somewhat familiar, but the areas of focus is what we called them in November, and the title has changed slightly. So we're now calling these community development scenarios. And the three areas that we're looking at are the 52nd from Woodstock down to Flavel Drive, and then 72nd from Foster down to Harney Street. And that's been amended slightly because we were initially just looking at Woodstock down to Crystal Springs, but the stretch or the area that we're looking at has just grown a little bit more north-south. And then again, the Project Advisory Committee, I believe at the September meeting, gave the recommendation or suggestion to staff to also look at the 92nd and Flavel back station. And so that is very much something that we are bringing into the project as well. And it looks like, Julie, you have a question.
I was just clapping. I was excited because that's one of the things that I mentioned, because that's near where I live. So I'm excited to see something happen there.
Great. And so just before I hand it over to Laura to give more information, just a reminder that we're looking at 4 scenarios. So they are the base case, the enhanced intersections, the corridors, and then the centers and corridors. So there's 4 different scenarios. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I want to do that handoff to Laura. But what I will say is that each one of these scenarios is additive. So we're you know, on the base case, we're starting out here, and then we're you know, we're moving to the enhanced intersections, and we're building, or we're adding to each one. And so so just know that. And then the other thing I will say, especially as we get to scenarios in 3 and 4, is that there may be something that you or the community, the public at large, really likes one component of scenario 3, and that's okay. Like it's not like you have to go with all of scenario 3 or all of scenario 4. That there may be some a la carte options there, and so we recognize that, and we actually are looking forward to excuse me, hearing your thoughts on that. And so so just wanted to put those disclaimers out there. Okay, I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point and pass it on to Laura.
Okay, I'm going to, I put a link in the chat, which you all can open and explore, but I'm also going to share my screen. So if you want to do that later and in your own time, it will be available for you. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see that link that I shared with you. And you, if you want to explore this as we're talking, feel free to do that. And I'm just getting my bearings, because sometimes when I share my screen, things just go haywire. And I can't see you, and I love to see faces. Okay, so if you're able to join the board, great. I see a few of you, and you can see on my screen, you know, there's some names and some arrows popping up. This is really a tool that we use as a virtual pinup space. So you can imagine we're in a big room together, and you know, if we were in an actual room together, these might be on the wall, and you know, the community would be invited to go up and look a little bit further. But before I zoom in, I'm just going to give you an overview of this virtual pinup space. Marty walked us through a little bit the 4 scenarios that we'll be looking at, and I've laid them out here in that order that she described, where we're talking about less change to more transformation and more change. And she's also described for you, especially as we get into the latter 2 scenarios, that those may have a lot of different pieces on them, but this is very much, we're thinking of like an a la carte series of changes, but it really goes from left to right, less change to more change. And the maps are shown on an aerial, and I'll zoom into them a little bit, starting with the first one. And the aerial has color on it. And if you're curious about what that color represents, it's the underlying zoning. And really, I like to think of these just in, you know, the series of colors, you know, the yellows being single dwelling, you know, the reds being commercial, the blues being in the family of multi-dwelling, so like apartments and townhouses. So that's the underlying zoning. That's what already exists. And then the other thing I wanted to orient you to, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Each of these has the same key. And that key, as it's describing potential zone changes, there's a hatch and an associated color with those. And just because not everybody thinks of the same thing when we say apartments or townhouses, we laid out for you kind of a visual legend for you just to see a little bit of what that scale might look like, and just to give you a sense of what it is that we're talking about and describing in these scenarios. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Scenario 1, like Marty mentioned, is sort of the base case, which isn't to say that things won't change, because of course things will change. Things are always changing. But this is just saying that we wouldn't be making any zoning changes. So the city and this neighborhood will continue to evolve, and most of the big focus areas for growth and change in services and the like will continue to go out of the neighborhood into the places that have the zoned capacity for taking on some of that growth. So especially we're talking about Lentz Town Center, of course, 82nd Avenue, Woodstock being a designated neighborhood corridor, the existing Woodstock Neighborhood Center, Foster, and the neighborhood center associated with that. So all of those have zoning capacity to take on growth. And so we can imagine that transportation improvements, which I think Brian will talk about next, will be focused on how do we get people to those goods and services that are happening outside of the neighborhood, because that's mostly where they will be located. If we look at scenario 2, this is a little bit of changes that we can propose without doing a designated comprehensive map change. So within the envelope that we have right now, we can sort of nibble at the edges and think about these intersections that community members have been wanting more focus. So certainly we can do more bumping up of density of apartments and commercial along, already designated neighborhood corridors and centers. But then along 52nd, specifically, we can also bump up a little bit of the residential densities. And then, at Ogden and 52nd, there's some commercial, there's a commercial node that could get a little bit of a bump in terms of like what, creating a small mixed use node there. And then again, along 72nd, not a whole lot of change. Most of it would be along Woodstock, where again, we already have a neighborhood corridor where we're expecting growth, but we could do a little bit more there. And we could also enhance this node at Duke and 72nd within our current envelope and comprehensive land use designation. So we could do a little bit along these intersections, and again, focus the transportation improvements to get to the services along the intersections, but you're not going to see a whole lot of focused goods and services there until we start moving a little bit to the right here. Scenario 3 is about corridors. So it's really looking at growing in a way that is sort of focused from the mid block to 52nd and or 72nd, and designating both of those or each of those or one of those as a neighborhood corridor, and then using that designation to do a little bit more with the zoning to bump up some of the land use that could allow more goods and services to be located in those areas. So you can see, we're still focusing at these intersections about where we would want most of that to occur, where the nodes are kind of naturally occurring. And then thinking especially along 72nd, where we have the ability to do more residential that could support the kinds of densities that could support these nodes, where we would bump up the commercial. But again, pretty linear growth pattern, similar to what you would see along Woodstock or along 92nd, because it's focused along this corridors, along both of these corridors. And then when we move to scenario 4, this one also shows corridors, the neighborhood corridors at 52nd and 72nd, but there's 3 additional things that we are suggesting for discussion. And again, like Marty said, these could be all in combination, or could be that the community likes 1 or 2 or none. But the first one is looking at the existing neighborhood center at Woodstock and extending it down to encompass the intersection at Duke along 52nd, and sort of growing, maybe not as linear to the 52nd Avenue at that northern end, but kind of growing it out a little bit and increasing the density to kind of support that neighborhood center and also stretch it down, bring it down into the neighborhood. Similar concept on 72nd here with the Heart of Foster Neighborhood Center. So bringing some of that density that's already there allowed on Foster and Woodstock and kind of bringing it east-west along Woodstock and creating more density in terms of residential apartments and townhomes to support that. So that's sort of, again, extending that into the neighborhood a little bit more with this neighborhood center. A third option that we wanted to bring to you for discussion, and I think it was highlighted in those notes from the MERP class, was this idea of really thinking about focusing along Flavel and 72nd with sort of both mixed use and residential that could support the kinds of mixed use center that we want here. So this would be a proposed new neighborhood center at this intersection and extending out a little bit more to again support what could happen at that intersection. And the idea here is that we would support this node in a kind of east-west direction towards 82nd Avenue that really emphasizes what could happen along Flavel and thinking about that connection to the MAX station at 92nd and Flavel. So that's kind of what this pattern is showing. It's all, pretty conceptual, but this is kind of gives you a sense of the different types of things that we wanted to illustrate for discussion with you today. So I see a number of you are in the concept board, which is great. Glad to see that you're exploring. I would also say that, I want to open this up for discussion and hear your questions. And we do have some questions for you if you need the prompt, which you might not. But I would also invite you to, if you want to, use the chat. You can also use this sticky note function. This is what I like to use. You can create a sticky note and you can type, your comment here, and just put it near the map or wherever you want to in the space, just as long as you don't cover up the map for other people to view. I don't think I'm gonna stop sharing because it might be good for us to look at this all together. But if you all want me to, I can. I'm gonna leave it up to the group. But I'm gonna pause so we can have some discussion.
And I think I'm gonna go ahead and put the questions that we have in the chat, which we would have on the PowerPoint, but we're gonna stay focused on the concept board. And so I'm gonna just go ahead and put the questions in the chat.
Thanks, Marty. And will you facilitate that? I'm having trouble seeing things. I just don't want to miss anybody's comment. Thank you.
Mike.
Thanks. Scenario 4 looks fantastic to me, but in these increasing density scenarios, is there any conversation with TriMet to improve transit in these areas?
Really good question. And I might let Brian add. I'm going to start answering that question, but Brian, feel free to take it away. So we have hired Jarrett Walker and Associates to assist us with transit analysis for this project. And we are going to be having if not at a special meeting in March or at the April meeting for the committee, we're going to have a transit focused conversation. And so definitely have to be talking about transit with all of these scenarios. There's some really interesting key findings from the work that Jarrett Walker and Associates has done. We've been really fortunate that Grant O'Connell from TriMet, who is a senior transit planner, has participated in that work. So TriMet is very much participating and observing this project. Grant's also part of the technical advisory committee as well. And I think that's one of the things that we need to have I guess a clear understanding of, as that transit improvements or the future of transit in how it supports this area is likely only going to happen if we go towards a more aggressive scenario. So just that's kind of one of the trade-offs that we need to talk about as staff, as the city, as TriMet, as the public. With that said, TriMet is there's not going to be necessarily any commitments with this project as well on what TriMet can do. And so again, that's something to just be clear about. I will say that a number of years ago, both Seth and I participated in TriMet's service enhancement planning, and specifically in the service enhancement planning for the Southeast area. And there is some proposed future lines that may, at this point, need to be reconsidered for both equity reasons as well as population reasons, population service. And so I think that there is the ability to potentially do advocacy on transit, but it is going to be very much tied to what other land use and transportation decisions that come out of this project. And so that's a very long way to answer your question, but transit is absolutely going to be part of the discussion as we move forward in this project.
Yep, I think you covered it, Marty. So
okay,
more to come. And I think I saw Nancy had a question, but I think Julie had her hand up first. Julie, you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of going on the transportation thing, and this might come up in a different slide, but first of all, I love all of these diagrams, and I'm really excited for any changes that can happen. But I'm curious, like, just as a cyclist, when I'm out riding, well, even when I'm driving, like cars go very fast on 52nd and 72nd, and of course 82nd. But so like you're building up these areas, are you also going to be redesigning the streets to make them, not just putting in speed bumps, but actually making the streets more difficult to speed on? Like with 72nd, it's a kind of a narrow road, but then there's parking on both sides. So when I ride on it, which I hardly ever do, but if I'm biking on it, I just have to go into the lane. And it's just, they're very aggressive streets. So I'm wondering if with these new like businesses and, apartments and stuff, if there's also, if you guys are also considering street calming, just to make them more safe if you're going to have more people on them.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think that it's gonna, we sort of need to wait and see what the community preferred alternative is before we really get into, looking at different alternatives for 52nd. I mean, we'll be doing that in the next round of the project, but that is going to be one of the questions that we have. So if say 72nd, we were going in the really sort of the scenario 4, the most built out, highest density scenario, that would be a conversation we need to have is, are we going to be removing parking for bike lanes and providing that access to the commercial opportunities on the street, or are we providing access through adjacent streets, like we have elsewhere, I think it's just going to be a conversation we have. It's a trade-off, something we have to weigh the trade-offs on in every project. And, if we remove parking, then when new apartments come in, then we hear complaints from people that say they don't have anywhere to park, or they have to park in sort of, nearby residential streets. And so, yeah, that's we're not quite there yet, but that's a great question to have and something to keep on top of mind as we move forward. And going back up the list. So Nancy, you had a question about financing. Is it either or for managing all of these proposed projects? I think if I'm reading your question right, I think that what Marty was saying is that these are sort of different scenarios, and you could pick and choose. So it's not a one or the other on each of these scenarios. And really, this is just changing Marty, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but really it's just changing the zoning that would allow for this development to happen. So it wouldn't be a project that comes in all at once to develop these scenarios, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I just want to make sure that we understand, Nancy, your question regarding financing.
Understand. Well, I was just wondering if, as you kind of look across, there's added things to the third one and or fourth one. And I just wondered if there had to be some choices, but it sounds like if it's mostly zoning, that wouldn't be, that wouldn't be costing a lot more.
Right. Yeah. And so like, I think, and I think that this is a question that's definitely coming up internally too. This right here is not necessarily where the financing conversation is, but it is in the transportation improvements to support. And so that, we're not there yet, but that's also very much an internal question that we have as far as is around just the ability to fund transportation projects. So, but yes, all of this would have to happen really in the private sector or through our community development groups or other groups that receive public funds for development. So. And I feel like I see Anna and Mike, and then I also am seeing some questions from Ryan, excuse me, but I'm not sure the order of when the questions came in. So
yeah, I think Mike should go first.
Okay, thanks, Anna.
Thanks again. So I'm a big proponent of high density in our neighborhoods, and I loathe parking lots. So I notice on scenario 4, there's a lot of shading for parking lots and apartments and townhomes at these intersections and along the corridors that are right now populated with huge, awful empty parking lots. How do you incentivize the conversion of those parking lots to high density housing?
Oh gosh, good question. And definitely a question that we that either the market addresses or we as government agencies have to come in and intervene. So, for one, zoning can be a tool. A planning project like this can be a tool for I guess, broader recognition of a geography. And with zoning, there can be, I guess, speculation or interest from the development community. With that said, there are areas in our city that have been zoned for much higher intensities, i.e. Gateway, that have not yet been developed in the last 30 years with the intensity of zoning that's there. And so that is when, our tool as a city, and there's probably others as well, is either through Prosper Portland's ability to have urban renewal districts or neighborhood prosperity kind of initiatives or MPIs. And so like the J district is an MPI, for example. And so those are areas to really focus on development tools. And then additionally, we have the Portland Housing Bureau that every year they have, I believe, 2 cycles of putting money out towards the affordable housing community. And so like that's another way of doing it. But that is absolutely a question that we continue to navigate as a city and as a community, for sure.
Marty, do you mind if I jump in and add
Yeah,
on to your
please.
answer?
Yeah, thank you.
I also wanted to mention, there's already a lot of things in place to help encourage the conversion of parking lots into high density housing. I mean, there is a market component we're kind of relying on private development to occur, but things like very minimal or no minimum parking standards is one incentive. A lot of the zoning code is built around transit-oriented development and transit-supportive development along centers and corridors. So there's already a lot of zoning tools in play. So, and some of the proposed changes here could help continue that in some of these areas. So, in addition to what Marty said, there's also a lot of zoning tools at our disposal that some of these potential changes could help make happen and encourage that conversion.
Hey, Kevin, sort of to jump on that, I think related, there's a question that Ryan had about how these scenarios and RIP interact. Do you want to just build on that a little bit?
Yeah, and again, I'm definitely welcome Kevin and Bill and others from my bureau to jump in on that question too. So the residential infill project, of course, is for just the yellow areas on the map. So the existing single dwelling zoning areas. So yes, the really where the cursor is going on the map is really helpful. And so what that allows is it allows the ability for more duplexes, not only just one accessory dwelling unit on the site, but 2 accessory dwelling units on the site. If there is an affordable housing component, there's the ability to do more units on the site. So getting into kind of a 4-plex or more. And so, but that's with affordable housing built in. And so that's kind of what residential infill project does. With the multi-dwelling zoning, there is obviously the ability to do more townhome type development, more of your kind of garden apartments, or your apartment buildings that are either 3 stories or 4 stories, depending on the intensity of the multi-dwelling zone. And that's again, typically we want that zoning to be in areas that are adjacent to services and amenities and transit. So that's typically where we map multi-dwelling zoning. And I hope I guess the other thing I would say is that what the single dwelling zones do versus the multi-dwelling and the commercial mixed use is that there's a broader spectrum of housing types that those zones allow. And so it's, allowing for more choices of housing within a community, more affordability options within a community. Typically, so City of Portland a couple years ago is the first city to have inclusionary housing. And so inclusionary housing is a requirement when there are 20 units or more in a particular development, then there is the requirement that or 20%, excuse me, 20% of the units are affordable. And so that the ability to have more affordable housing units required by the private market is within the multi-dwelling in the commercial mixed use. So I guess that's maybe just maybe a short way to answer your question, Ryan. I hope I kind of captured what you were looking for there.
And I would just add that the basic level of service and all the other scenarios are affected by the RIP. So, everything in yellow is still, that is still the zoning that is in place. And so with the new ability to increase densities in terms of duplexes and triplexes and accessory dwelling units, the area will grow. So when we think about a future 25, 35 years, the area in yellow will have more people, or it has the ability to grow in that way. So I guess the question is, what happens to, and where do we want focused goods and services to support a neighborhood that's growing? And so the basic level of service is kind of, I think of that as like, that's the scenario where RIP is the way that we're growing, and it's offering housing choices to people, but maybe not as much in terms of services. The services are still outside. So.
Great, that's helpful. Anna, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I was wondering about, these kind of different scenarios that are obviously kind of a succession to a higher density. And I was wondering if there is a tool within the, proposed zoning changes to actually have incentives for certain areas to be developed first, and with a certain kind of programming in mind that also might help to change some of our daily behavior, which is badly needed, I think, in terms of how we go around town. And I mean, we are all very engaged community members here, but we have to get a large group of our community also to be attracted to a much well, how shall I put it, to a much more sustainable lifestyle of close proximity, and for which we actually need these kind of density points for daily needs. So I wonder if there are some programming and also some educational programs, or maybe even some experimental first little projects to say, like, this is our center point, this is how it could look like, if there's any like that in place.
Oh gosh, such a good question. Well, I would love to explore that question with you and with the committee more, because maybe there is. What I will say is, typically it is our urban renewal districts like Lentz where Prosper Portland actually purchases property, where there's more of the kind of identifying the parcels or prioritizing the intersections where growth is most desired to happen first. And so that specifically is a tool with the urban renewal districts. But I will say that the way that a community, and I don't really like to use branding because that's not my value set, but the way that a community identifies, or how we talk about a community, or how we talk about a geography, both from the community perspective and from the city perspective can also kind of assist with kind of that vision. And so again, that's kind of what I would like to explore in this planning project. Is there a way that we can do some prioritization within this plan, or at least state what the community and what the city would prefer to happen as far as kind of the order of business? And so, again, just want to put that out there. And then also urban renewal and neighborhood prosperity initiatives, which I've had the joy of working with for the last 6 or 7 years, are another tool. And so maybe there's some kind of shared learning that we can do about those tools, and see if there's a desire to put a recommendation in this plan about some other tools like that. So just a thought.
Marty, do you mind if I add on to your answer just real quick? I'll just, everything Marty said is great. I'll also add that maybe in a more basic level, one way to incentivize development is just simply by wherever the city is investing and spending money on infrastructure improvements, or it could be an urban renewal district or an NPI. But basically, wherever the city is spending money, because the whole idea is that after that, then the investment and the redevelopment would come to follow that. So kind of on a very basic level, but what we're doing here is looking at how and where do we want to prioritize these changes to both allow for the transportation improvements to happen, and also in turn the land use side and the development and growth.
This is Bill. I'll just mention one other thing. Zoning does play a role. Talking to local community development corporations like Rose CDC, they may be able to provide input as to what zones would really be the most attractive for them to pursue affordable housing development. What I hear sometimes is the single dwelling zones, being limited in terms of numbers of units can be less attractive for affordable housing developers to get involved versus some of the low-rise multi-family zones. So that's something to consider too, having those conversations with community development corporations is something to look at. And TriMet has a transit-oriented development program where they help fund development near transit. Of course, you need to get your transit in here to help make that happen. So that does highlight that convergence of where infrastructure and services are and where development could happen, and where you could use tools to encourage it.
Thanks, everyone. I just wanted to circle back too to make sure we didn't miss the question that Pam had. It says, at first blush, scenario number 4 seems the most appealing, and it sounds like that there's some consensus or some thought that is, you want to see more development and growth. But she was asking what the potential downsides of that comprehensive approach would be, and I'm sure that our BPS, you all heard members of the public express those downsides frequently when we propose things. So if you want to elaborate on some of those.
Well, just to expand on my question a little bit, I mean, one of your questions are there specific questions on the draft community development scenarios for the public? And maybe it's obvious to everyone else on the call, but to me, I mean, it would be very helpful to call out some pros and cons of each scenario for public discussion to help, people understand, why not jump to scenario number 4 automatically. And then again, at first blush, going into this study, I mean, we have so many acknowledged deficits in the study area that it seems like more is better. But I think having some staff comments about potential pros and cons, and then getting feedback from the public on those pros and cons of each of the 4 scenarios might be a way of structuring the discussion.
No, absolutely. So one thing that we're proposing to do, and I just want to be cognizant of time because we want to shift to the transportation section of this meeting tonight, but when we do the online open house or the public engagement that is going to go with these scenarios, we definitely will have an online survey that has questions. So there is that. But with each of these scenarios, we want to create evaluation matrix and criteria. And so we have the ability to provide some guidance in that kind of evaluative conversation with the public as far as trade-offs. And so, you know, like off the top of my head, you know, like some of the things that we would be identifying and kind of seeing, it's a little bit of a temperature gauge as far as what people are comfortable with, but, you know, each scenario has a certain access to services, and there's an increased potential as you go, you know, from scenario 1 to scenario 4 about access to services, local businesses, you know, commercial amenities. Another one is the ability for there to be affordable housing in the area, in the project area. And so again, less so in scenario 1, but more so on scenario 4. You know, also a range of housing types, less so on scenario 1, more so on scenario 4. The ability for us to consider transit in the future, transit improvements, transit access to the area, less on scenario 1, and it's a possibility on scenarios 2, 3, and 4. So those are the types of things. And so the evaluation matrix is a tool that a number of planning efforts have used. West Portland Town Center has used it. The Montgomery Park to Hollywood streetcar transit study used it. And then Kevin had also shared with me that the Interstate Bridge project is also using it. So there absolutely is something that we as staff are wanting to develop, and if we're able to, it'd be really great to get your feedback on as we communicate these options with the public. So really, really good question, Pam. Okay. Yeah.
One more question. I just wanted
Please.
we have one more question from Ryan. Marty, do we have comps citywide for each scenario?
We don't have like comps like in the real estate sense, but I think that's actually a really good question. I mean, I very much think of scenario 4 in this here, as there's a lot of similarities to Cully neighborhood, and specifically there is a neighborhood corridor along 42nd Avenue and then along Cully Boulevard, and there's a neighborhood center on 42nd Avenue and on Cully Boulevard. So that would be kind of a comparison. And I think that there's probably some other, I guess, comparisons that we could bring to the conversation before the committee. But yeah, that's a good question, and it'd be good for us to explore those and actually maybe invite folks to go investigate other parts of the city as they're considering these scenarios.
Just mention that when we did the comp plan, we did comparisons between all the centers we were considering for the city. So we know how much mixed use zoning versus multifamily versus single family you had in each one of our centers. And we can compare what's proposed here to places like Cully or Montevilla or Multnomah Village, just to see, how much opportunity for mixed use development is proposed here, like at Favell and 72nd area compared to other neighborhood centers.
Okay, that's really, really great. discussion. You ready, Brian, to kick it off with transportation?
Sure. Let me get everything. Yep. All right. So just a heads up, we're not quite as polished with the transportation improvements as we have with these the land use alternatives, but still have some information we want to share and get your thoughts on tonight. And then we'll be working to sort of make maps that complement one another as we go out to the public. So just so you know that that's on the horizon. And we shared this map last meeting, and I'm not going to really go into detail on it, but just letting you know that we did analysis of the streets. So this shows sort of streets with poor pavement condition, some of the paved streets with no curbs, unpaved streets. We also did some field work. Some of you joined us as we went out on a walk. This is in the Woodstock area, just seeing how some of these unpaved streets look as you're walking through them or biking. And then we also have been gathering feedback through the Pin at Portland tool and really going through those comments to learn about issues and needs in the area. And so similar for the bike maps, having sort of, this is more just before we showed this map that was showing the gaps in the bike network without any planned or funded facilities. Again, this is from that walk where you see people navigating some of these streets, really especially adjacent and parallel to Woodstock because of the lack of paved streets in that area. So we took that and we've been developing maps, and I'll share these in a minute, and happy to share it after the meeting as well. So right now it's largely just in a Google My Maps. That was the best way that we could sort of work collaboratively to develop these. But we've developed them we've separated out the bike map and then the really sort of all-encompassing other improvements on busy and local streets. So this shows those improvements, and we categorized them into sort of buckets of major corridor needs, intersection improvements, where there was local street paving, some street safety, and the local street safety is really the sort of these areas, less traffic streets around Brentwood Park. And this is this map here is a zone. So we've categorized some areas as traffic calming zones. We learned through the public feedback that there's a lot of comments on really each of these streets saying that there was speeding or an issue with just feeling unsafe walking. And so rather than saying one or the other should be prioritized for traffic calming, we just did more of a zone, which we're finding works better also anyways, and that if we do traffic calming, speed bumps, other measures holistically, that it typically works better to slow traffic in the area. And then we also have funded corridor and it listed as well, just so we know what projects are coming. And then with the bike map, did something similar. So we have, and this one actually might just be easier to walk through. But we have sort of similar categories in terms of neighborhood greenway gaps, bike network gaps, deficiencies, and then existing and funded projects. So, so here's the map. I don't know, I'll start with the bike network, why not? Since it's up. And we have, this is really just showing the existing and funded projects that we would say meet our current guidelines. So it's Foster, there's a few neighborhood greenways you see. We don't have the Springwater Trail on here, but that would be sort of the other sort of low stress safe facility. And then if I add the bikeway network deficiencies, you can see 52nd comes up. There's other streets that come up, Duke, portions of Woodstock, but those would be, as if you've experienced it, streets that have narrower bike lanes that wouldn't, if we were doing a project today, wouldn't necessarily meet our guidelines for a sort of safe, comfortable facility. So we've separated those out just to call those out as routes that might need to be improved. And then on top of that, we've put in some network gaps. So these are the neighborhood greenway gaps. And what we're hoping to do with during the open house and then feedback from you all and other groups is better understanding which of these makes sense and which of these should be prioritized. It would be great if we could do this sort of holistically, but obviously funding is always an issue. And so having a better sense of prioritization and what routes would make most sense would be helpful, especially because some of these, and you'll see as it relates to the other map that I'll show, overlap with some paving needs. And so again, funding, has to come into play of how we develop those streets. And so we'll get feedback. And then we also have just some bikeway network gaps. So you can see here, Steele comes up where it ends. There's also this 72nd is another gap, and that would relate then, to what we're proposing to do and what we kind of talked about earlier with those land use scenarios, depending on the type of scenario that we go with for the community development. We will adjust how we prioritize or how we implement these changes. But we're sort of saying with this scenario and at this stage of the project, really improving access and mobility within the neighborhood and is important in its own right. And then if we have sort of heavy development on 72nd or 52nd, then that'll start to shift the access and prioritization of how we could build out this network. So that is the bike network maps. And then similarly for the corridor and local streets, there's a lot going on this map, and we would love any feedback or comments you have about how we could sort of make this easier to understand, especially during the open house. But for each of these projects, I already sort of explained the zone, but on each street, you can click on a street. So Steele's come up and we expressed like what the issue or need was. So what we heard in the Pin at Portland or other feedback we've gotten, desire for crossings, traffic calming, bike lane gap exists. And then, so this is more or less just noting that there's a need for improvements there. Same with Holgate as a funded project, but Woodstock, we had a ton of Pin at Portland comments between 52nd and 72nd about the need for crossings there. And so just noting holistically, we don't specify here where those crossing locations would be. That's gonna somewhat relate also to the transit scenarios that we'll be talking about next time. But for each of these projects, we sort of note an issue or a need that came up and how we're trying to be addressing that. So 72nd, again, crossings, some traffic calming. There is the potential to add bike lanes, so that's that trade-off we talked about. And then the red is the paving, and similar to the bike network, what we're going to be asking the public, and you all can help. We'd love your feedback as well, is prioritizing this. Does one make more sense for circulation? You can kind of sort of see here what we did is this isn't every single gravel street. We didn't just holistically say every gravel street needs to be paved, but we really tried to focus on the ones where there was either a need for circulation around the sort of neighborhood center here, getting people to be able to just park and access and or walk or bike through that area, as we showed in that picture we had, or scenarios where there's not really a good east-west or north-south connection, and so trying to fill in that gap, even if it's not for people driving. So some of these might not be, we could talk about the type of paving that would look like. It could be more of a shared street, more of a bike or pedestrian connection, but just providing some better level of access and connectivity through the area. And then finally, we have some just some called out crossings or intersections that are in the project area as well. So like I said, I'm happy to share this link, and it's a lot to take in, and so we don't need to get fully into it now, but I do, but just noting that this is still somewhat of a draft form, very drafty draft, so we're interested in your feedback of how we could better present it, or if there's any sort of major issues or needs missing on either of these maps. It would be a great time to let us know, oh yeah, we've actually been hearing a lot about night, and then that would be it'd be a good time to learn about those. And so that's sort of just the leading questions we have are any projects missing or something that's funded that we missed, and then how to best visualize this and intersect it with those community development maps. And then if we're still open to ideas, if there is a project you feel like should be prioritized. We're not quite at that level yet. We're gonna have that sort of go alongside of the community development scenarios and also the transit work. But yeah, just wanted to start there. And before I get to comments, I'll just throw this out there that we do have, it's already been mentioned, that Jarrett Walker is working on the sort of transit network analysis. They've done a lot of transit work nationwide, but are housed here in Portland. And just calling this out, that this is the, you can see a clear gap for access to jobs and places. This is in the sort of really in the heart of Brentwood, Darlington, of how many people have access in 45 minutes at 12 p.m. So noon on a just normal day, the jobs or places reachable in 45 minutes. And you can just see this sort of huge sort of donut hole gap. And they've done a lot of sort of other work and access and weighing different trade-offs and scenarios. So we'll get into that next time, but just wanted to put this in there as maybe a little teaser or preview. So I can see if anyone has any questions. I'll just leave out the maps just in case there's a question.
Looks like Aaron has a question, Brian.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. So I was surprised to not see that quadrant between 72nd and 82nd, Duke and Flavel, with any sort of indication of need. And my bias is I live in that area, so I'm aware of it. And one thing I just observed today for the first time is just the difference between some of the blocks are very gridded, and then some, like Flavel to Duke, 72nd to 82nd, is a very not gridded. So like the one North-South Street, 78th, between two schools, high speed cars, no sidewalks. So I'm just kind of curious, again, like where that fits. And as not an expert, I know that I think there's a future bike path there, but it feels like a gap of attention. It's so I'm just curious if it's on anyone's radar screen.
Are you talking first about this section here?
No, just to the east of that, 78th in particular. It's the only north-south, fully north-south street between 72nd and 82nd.
Yeah.
And
so yeah, this is you can kind of see it in this map, and this has, if I remove the gaps, this is the funded projects. The 70s neighborhood Greenway is going to be going Flavel.
So that means there's a plan there already to do.
Yes, so it's a funded project, so it will be constructed. I think later this year is when it's starting construction. So that's
Thanks for clarifying that.
And that's something that we want to sort of help with these maps, is that when you look at this one, you might say, oh, there's nothing going on 78th, and then you have to go to the bike map and then see. So that's something we want to kind of clean up here before it goes to the public. But yeah. Good comment.
Anna, is it okay if I call on you next?
Yeah. I have two things. One is I think for those public workshops or public engagements, it would be super helpful to have like little images, like photos of the actual crossroad or where, you know, the point of discussion. I see a lot of people in public engagement, they are not used to reading maps, and they have a very hard time to envision what you are just talking about. So they need this kind of moment, because otherwise you talk for like 10 minutes about something and then you say, oh, I was on the other corner. So I think that would be super helpful to have that. I know it gets too complicated in those maps. But when you do those public workshops, I think it will be really helpful. And then I have one point, and this is just because I got a lot of feedback from people biking from it's not Ogden, it's on Nap crossing 52nd and then also 45th. And I get a lot of, I haven't biked that myself, but I know quite a lot of people coming from Brentwood, Darlington, crossing over to the schools or over to trying to get to the Woodstock area. And they are very scared about these kind of wiggly crossings on 52nd and 45th, especially with children, and if they have the kids in tow. So I think it would be, especially for the bike paths, important to look at who is using those in the small bits and pieces of the area, and not just to see, you know, the long connectivity. But there seems to be a lot of, you know, smaller scale traffic in the neighborhood where people go with children, and they have completely different needs and ideas of how they navigate these large streets and the safety issues.
Yeah, that's great and very helpful. Yeah, I will say the Napoc Greenway is funded, so we note that in for 2023, so next year. But there is a gap from 52nd to the west, and so we've called that out as something that needs to be addressed. And the Nap 45th intersections, something we've heard of.
Yeah, but what they say is for them it's very dangerous to take that turn from Nap onto 52nd.
Yeah, that sort of wiggle here.
That doesn't work for bicyclists, I guess. I don't know. I haven't tried it myself.
Yeah, we've done. Currently, no. There's different things we've done elsewhere with this kind of intersections. Either sort of ramping it up, you know, two-way on one side of the street, or different type of crossing treatments. So it kind of depends on the context, but we can look at that. And I hear you about the sort of maps, and I think that's something that we want to distill for the public open house is doing this in a way that is still comprehensive, but that is easier to understand with images. So thanks for that comment. Aaron, did you have a question? No, okay. Yeah, and Ryan, I agree. I'm just catching up on the chat, but yeah, the 45th, that is because of that hill, and so again, that's something we got to take into consideration with that improvement. So, like I said, we can share out these maps after the meeting, and feel free to take a look. You know, I would just say that if you're sharing it with neighbors or others, let them know that it is very preliminary. We're still, you know, developing these, and just because I don't want somebody to see something and get excited or get upset, and then it changes. And but yeah, if it's sort of you're sharing this and note something or somebody says something is missing, let us know. We can incorporate that as we go out to the public with these. So I'm just going to circle back, and Marty, do you want to cover this? You want me to?
Sure. Well, we can tag team
go
it.
ahead.
So just to share, you know, I think last time when we met in November, we were aiming for a winter open house, and that's shifted a bit due to just how Omicron affected the project team and affected our community earlier this year. Again, we're aiming for a springtime open house. We are thinking that there is going to be, again, this online component, but every day we're getting different information about kind of the more flexibility of meeting in person. And so we definitely want to have some sort of in-person option. It may just be kind of drop-in hours, or we may kind of shift to doing more of an in-person open house. And again, we're kind of navigating that real time. So that's kind of where we're at. Where we're at. It's different every day. And then just to note too that tonight our project team member, Corinne Montana, could not be with us because she is actually with Latino Network's Colegios de Padres kickoff meeting. And so we are doing a parallel engagement of our Spanish speaking Latinx community. And so just know that that's happening. And we look forward to hearing from Corinne next time how that's going. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, we're kind of in the heart of it right now, just trying to come up with the actual content that's still very drafty. And then also shifting to doing planning public involvement. So just know that it's a busy time for this project, and we look forward to your feedback. And then the next slide. So as we've mentioned, and again, I'm not sure kind of where our PBOT team members are at with this, but we absolutely want to have a transit focused meeting. Right now, I'm not sure if it's going to be a special meeting in March or April, or if we're going to just have that conversation kind of saved for our next project advisory committee meeting, which is going to be in April. So stay tuned. We're still kind of figuring out some scheduling on that. And then just note that, again, as far as what we're doing is we're working on kind of, again, still fleshing out this comprehensive list of needs that have been identified through the process, working on potential solutions, and then preparing for spring engagement. So that's kind of what we're working on. For just to wrap it up for tonight, again, I'm going to be sending out an email to you all probably Wednesday. And in that, it'll be you know, the link to the concept board for the community development scenarios, which you already have tonight, but we'll send it out again. And then also we'll include the Pinup Portland memo, so you can read through that, and then the Google Maps that Brian shared tonight. So that's what's going to be in the email. We do ask that if you have thoughts or feedback on any of those things, to just give us feedback. Typically within a week or two of today's meeting is when that feedback is going to be the most helpful to us. And then finally, on the concept board, for the purposes of kind of transparency, we're going to be sharing a PDF of all those community development scenarios on the webpage. And so that will be shared out publicly. I am having some anxiety about the concept board being shared broadly, because there is the ability to put stickies on that, and we really are just wanting that feedback to be to the from the committee to staff. And also just noting that if that concept board is shared broadly without kind of the additional context, it could be just very alarming to folks. And so we want to keep a PDF on the web page. And so again, for transparency, we will be sharing the information, but just to honor the committee process, if you could keep the concept board link within the committee, that would be appreciative. Any questions on that?
I was just maybe going to add, Marty, that yeah, we'll most likely be sending out some type of doodle poll or something asking people about sort of the next couple of months. There's a lot going on, I think, in the next few months, and so we're just trying to, we want to honor your time and make it valuable for you all, but also don't want things to get skipped over. So the transit workshop, for example, maybe a conversation about the open house, and once we figure out what that's going to look like, we can brainstorm ways to really make it an exciting, just an exciting and fun way to talk about the future of your neighborhood. And so those might be forthcoming, and we might shift and have a March meeting and then maybe skip, but again, we'll try to communicate that all with you and be respectful. So. And thanks for another 2 hours. Really appreciate it. It
was lovely seeing all of you.
So, Marty and I can stand for a few more minutes, but feel free to jump off. So, thank you all.
Went pretty fast. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
thank you all.
Good.